Welcome to another edition of the Rome News Tribune Studio Central Face to Face. I'm Associate Editor Doug Walker. Our very special guest today, Dr. Jeff McDaniel, Superintendent of the Floyd County Schools. Jeff, we appreciate you coming in and being with us and offering some insight into what has been unquestionably a difficult last week to 10 days. Let me start first, Jeff, with a question. We have heard for a number of years that the state has been reducing its budget to the local schools. But how did this situation get, and I'll just say, so dire at this particular time?
I think that's a great question, and you're right, Doug. For many years now, the state has been going through some tough economic times. Certainly education hasn't been immune to that. We think about Floyd County Schools specifically, we're looking at about a $50 million revenue decrease over the last 10 years. Those are some pretty steady declines in our revenue. I think over the past several years, as we've kind of kept an eye on this and watched this, I think there was some idea and some hope that things might get just a little bit better as we kind of watched legislation and watched over the last several years, that maybe some revenues would level off or start coming back. Unfortunately, we didn't see that. And forecasting out even beyond 2014, 15 and 16 doesn't look like there's going to be much of recovery going on as well. So when you couple that and that Floyd County Schools kind of rode this thing out until the very end in hopes that we would see some recovery, it just didn't happen. And when you think about our expenditures being at around $94 million and our revenue is projected to come in at $86 million, and 90% of our budget is based on personnel, it led us to this road, and it led us to some very tough and hard decisions.
Tell us a little bit, if you would, about how some of those decisions were made, because we have heard, and let me make it perfectly clear, the Rome News Tribune has never intended to publish any list of names, but we have heard, I'll just say, we have heard that a couple of Teachers of the Year were included in this reduction of workforce, and I'm sure that had to be extremely difficult for you.
Yes, sir, and how all this comes about, several years ago, we went ahead and approved as a Board of Education, the Board of Education approved a RIF policy, a reduction in force policy. The policy basically says that at any time you need to write a reduction in workforce plan. Certainly the policy now gives you that leniency to go about and do that. So as we sat down and knew that we were going to have to make some tough decisions with these personnel, and some very hard ones, we started looking at some other counties that have already gone through this process. They've made some of these tougher decisions over the past several years. We looked at their RIF policies. We certainly worked with our attorneys, and we worked with a lot of different folks to assure that when we wrote the RIF policy, that it was a fair and accurate type of plan that had people in mind first, Doug. That was very important to me. I wanted to make sure that the policy always kept the integrity of our people. Once the policy was written and the plan was put into place, the RIF policy and how it works and where teachers end up, certainly they got filtered through the policy, and some fell out and some were able to remain.
We understand that there may have been an effort to maneuver some of the 49 percenters. And for the folks who may not understand what we're talking about there, some teachers retire, but because of their value as long educators, they're brought back in at 49% of pay, and I guess reduced benefits certainly to some extent too. But we understand that there may have been an effort to perhaps maneuver some of those to take advantage of some situations.
Absolutely, Doug, and the approach that we took on this, we have approximately 1,536 employees. Everyone, I could sit here for the rest of this day and evening and commend their worth and what they bring and value to our system. That's what's made this process so difficult and hard. Some of those employees include 49%. We knew that during this difficult time and difficult decision, as we were going to have to be making personnel decisions and watching some of our teachers go out our door and not have a job in 2014, we wanted to assure that we were looking very closely at our 49% retired folks as well. It's very hard to take a full-time teacher who's maybe been doing it for 3, 4, or 5 years and putting them on the street when a 49% person still remains in the system. So we addressed that with fidelity. It certainly wasn't a measurement of anyone's worth. Every teacher has brought tremendous value to our system, but we had to make some difficult decisions along those roads too, to assure that the plan accurately gave us a detailed outline of how it would look in the very end.
Tell us, if you would, Dr. McDaniel, where you believe the system is going to be hurt the most. You can't cut this many people without, being hurt to some degree. Is it the fact that you had to reduce counselors, maybe the loss of a few language instructors? Where does Jeff believe that this is going to, have the most impact?
Doug, we know that 119 people will not be joining us next year, and those 119 people all had very demonstrated competencies, qualities, and worth about them. To watch them not be with us next year is a deep cut and a deep hurt and a deep sorrow in all of us. When I think about the plan in general, one of the things that we're very proud of in the plan, that no programs, no services, nor did we close any schools occurred during this process. Now, it might look and feel a little bit different next year, but our counselors and our administrators and our media services and those types of services and all of our programs are still going to be in place for 2014. We're very proud of that. Obviously, anytime that you look at a cut like this, or you look at some decisions that go along these lines, class size is going to be something that we need to watch very closely. Before the rift, we were sitting at about a 1 to 12 class size ratio. Now, you have to understand, when we talk about ratios, we talk about them all certified folks in the system, including me, compared to our FTE count of students. Most systems sit right now, because they've made some tough decisions, around a 1 to 15 ratio. We figure that after this washes out, we're going to be right around that 1 to 15 mark. Will we see an increase in class sizes? Well, obviously when 119 people are leaving, yes, we will. Are they going to have an impact on how students learn? Absolutely not. Instructional integrity was the #1 quality that was always maintained throughout the division of this RIP plan.
Was there ever any consideration, serious consideration given to bumping up that tax, or are you pretty close to your maximum allowed by the state?
I think that's a great question, and I get this a lot. And right now we currently sit at around 18.556 mils. We are allowed by the state to go to 20 mils, a 1.5 mil increase. Whether you did a small increase in that mil or took it all the way to 20, it was still not going to give us the monetary value we needed to balance our budget. We had to look at some other areas, and we had to unfortunately go into where 90% of our budget is, and that's through the personnel side.
Not the way a gentleman would like to come into a new job.
It's been an interesting way to start your tenure as superintendent, no doubt about it. I kind of knew through the process that the board was looking for someone who could come in and with grace and fidelity implement a plan. And I'm going to tell you this, Doug, I could have done this in 15 minutes. We could have balanced this budget in 15 minutes, but when you make decisions like that and you do it so quick-handed, you oftentimes forget about what you're truly dealing with, and this is the lives of people. So before we just pull the trigger on a decision, it took us 80 to 90 days for me to get to a point that I was ready to roll the budget out, because I turned every stone over and cultivated every field. These are about people and their lives, and I wanted to make sure that when we made that tough decision, I had looked at every variable in the equation before I added that line item onto the budget.
One of the concerns I've had in talking with business people over the last 6 or 8 years as the recession has been going on has been some concern that companies have learned to live lean, that they have reduced themselves. Their bottom lines in some circumstances have come up. When money does come back at some point, do you have a plan for bringing people back? Do you have any idea of what might come back first?
I think that's a great question. I talked to a lot of legislators on various occasions, and right now we understand that education will never go back, Doug. It will never go back to the levels we were seeing revenue coming in 5, 6, 7 years ago. It just isn't going to. And over the 10 years, we keep seeing a decline. My plight to the legislators, my cry to the legislators is we would like to start seeing a leveling off of the revenue. Can we just get to a point where we plateau and this is what we can expect for the next several years? It would help us do a little bit better strategic planning. And I know they have a tough job to do down there, and I know it's bigger than just education, but certainly I agree with you, Doug. The economy is going to turn around. When that is, we're kind of getting some indications we're not going to see much of that in 15 and 16. So we just want to make sure that as we move through these next several years, that we are putting students in classrooms and have a great opportunity to learn. As we see some of that money flow back and some of that money come back in, we want to make sure that, number one, that priority is driven to our instruction and that it benefits kids.
Well, let me reverse the question then. If we don't see the situation improving for 15 and 16 next couple of fiscal years, is there a danger of further cuts?
Well, I've had that question asked to me many times, and sometimes I tell people I have this crystal ball, although be it a little cloudy and maybe even cracked, it's hard to kind of see in there. I will share this with you. If we see another sharp decline in revenue and an impact and a sharp decline in revenue, we're going to be watching very carefully and very closely how this is going to impact the decisions we have made today. Hopefully, as we move forward and we see some attrition and possibly some people that leave or retirements or things like that, we're kind of remembering that at any time another dip in revenue might lead us to having to look at some different variables to solve the equation again. We're going to be a little more optimistic and look at things as we've kind of got our system where we need to be matching revenue and expenditure now, and kind of control that a little bit better in ensuring that our students still get that quality education for quality life, but that we don't get back into a situation where our expenditures are starting to rise above our revenues. Little closely monitored budgets and watching those at a much more intense pace.
Well, difficult decisions, and we certainly appreciate your taking time out of a very busy schedule to be with us on this latest edition of Studio Central's Face to Face. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.